Sometimes the person who changes your life is someone you were never supposed to text. Ethan Walker had spent the last 10 years believing emotions were distractions rich men could no longer afford. At 38 years old, the billionaire founder of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America stood inside the private terminal at JFK Airport, wearing a charcoal cashmere coat that cost more than most people's rent, staring through the giant glass windows as rain poured across the runway in silver streaks. His assistant kept talking beside him about the merger waiting in Tokyo, about investors, shareholders, interviews, and numbers large enough to make headlines across Wall Street by morning, but Ethan barely listened. He looked exhausted in a way sleep could never fix. "Sir, boarding starts in 5 minutes. The flight attendant reminded him politely. Ethan nodded once and reached for his phone, expecting another email from his legal team. Instead, a text message appeared from an unknown number. "Please tell me you're still awake. I really need help tonight." Ethan frowned. Wrong number. He should have ignored it. He almost did. But another message came seconds later. "Liam's breathing is getting worse and I don't know what to do anymore." Ethan stared at the screen longer this time. Around him, wealthy passengers laughed softly while sipping expensive champagne, rolling designer luggage toward the jet bridge without a care in the world. Yet somehow that single message cut through all the noise inside his head. He typed back before he could stop himself. "I think you texted the wrong person." 3 dots appeared instantly. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. It's been a horrible night. Please ignore me." Ethan should have ended it there. Instead, he found himself typing another response while his assistant continued explaining stock projections nearby. "Is your son okay?" There was a long pause this time. Then finally, "I honestly don't know." Ethan exhaled slowly. He walked away from the crowd toward the quieter windows overlooking the runway lights. Another message appeared. "Sorry. You don't know me. I'm just tired. Single mom. Long week. No sleep." Ethan read the words twice. He didn't know why they bothered him so much. Maybe because no one had spoken honestly to him in years. Everyone around him always wanted something. Money. Influence. Access. But this stranger sounded too exhausted to pretend. His phone vibrated again. "Liam finally fell asleep beside me, but every time he coughs I panic." Ethan loosened his tie slightly. "Mr. Walker?" the assistant called out. "The board is already waiting in Tokyo." Ethan barely heard him. He looked down at the screen again and typed slowly. "How old is he?" 6. "Loves dinosaurs and pancakes. Hates medicine." Ethan felt something unfamiliar pull at his chest. Before he could answer, another text came through. "Sorry again. You're probably some random guy wondering why a stranger is trauma dumping at midnight." Ethan looked around the massive terminal filled with polished marble floors, luxury advertisements, and millionaires hurrying toward private flights, and for the first time in a long time, none of it felt important. Then his phone lit up one more time. "I just wish I didn't have to do this alone anymore." Claire Bennett had not sat down in almost 16 hours. The tiny apartment smelled faintly like children's cough medicine, microwave macaroni, and the lavender candle she only lit when anxiety started taking over the room. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window while 6-year-old Liam slept curled beneath a faded dinosaur blanket on the couch, his small chest rising unevenly every few seconds. Claire sat on the floor beside him with her back against the couch cushions, staring at the stranger's messages on her cracked phone screen. She still could not believe someone had answered. Most people ignored desperate texts from unknown numbers. But this man had stayed. She typed slowly with tired fingers. "Thank you for being nice about this. Most people would have blocked me by now." Across the country, Ethan leaned against the terminal window while the boarding announcement echoed overhead for the second time. "Final boarding call for Tokyo." His assistant approached carefully. "Sir, if we leave now, we can still make it." Ethan did not move. Instead, he looked down at Claire's message and surprised himself by smiling slightly for the first time all week. He typed back, "Maybe most people are terrible." Claire stared at the reply and laughed quietly under her breath before covering her mouth so she would not wake Liam. The sound startled her because she realized she had not laughed in days. She glanced toward the overdue electric bill sitting unopened on the kitchen counter and rubbed her forehead. Her diner shift had ended only 3 hours earlier, And in 6 more hours she needed to clock into her morning cleaning job downtown. She was exhausted down to her bones. Yet somehow texting this stranger made the apartment feel a little less lonely. Ethan loosened his tie completely now, ignoring the impatient look from his assistant. Another message appeared from Claire. Sorry if I overshared earlier. Long nights make people emotional. Ethan looked at the glowing runway lights outside and typed carefully. No. Long nights make people honest. The words hit Claire harder than she expected. Her eyes drifted toward Liam again. His breathing sounded calmer now, but she still could not relax completely. Mothers like her never really relaxed. Not when every emergency could destroy the tiny balance keeping their lives together. Her phone buzzed again. Does he always get sick like this? Claire swallowed. Asthma since he was 3. Hospitals are expensive, so I usually try to manage it at home first. Ethan read the message twice. Expensive. The word bothered him. He had spent more than $80,000 on a watch last month and barely remembered buying it. Somewhere in New York City, a woman was deciding whether her son could afford to go to the hospital. Sir, the assistant interrupted quietly. The investors are waiting. Ethan finally turned toward him. Tell them the flight is delayed. The flight is not delayed. Ethan looked back at his phone. It is now. The assistant blinked in confusion while Ethan walked farther from the gate. Another text came through from Claire. Liam keeps asking when superheroes sleep. I told him they do not. Ethan smiled faintly. Smart mom. Claire looked down at her son's sleeping face and felt tears threaten her eyes. Again. Then her phone buzzed one more time. For some reason I think you are probably a good dad. Ethan stopped walking. The noise of the airport faded around him completely. He stared at the screen for several seconds before finally typing back. I do not think I would know how to be one. The strange thing about loneliness was how quickly it attached itself to silence after finally hearing someone understand you. Claire stared at Ethan's last message while the apartment remained dark except for the small lamp beside the couch. I do not think I would know how to be one. She read the sentence again slowly. Something about it felt heavier than the words themselves. Most men bragged. Most rich men especially. But this stranger sounded almost ashamed of something. Claire pulled the blanket higher around Liam's shoulders and typed carefully. The fact that you worry about it probably means you would be better than you think. Ethan looked down at the message while standing near the enormous airport windows. Jets moved through the rain outside like glowing ghosts across the runway. He had spent years mastering negotiations, acquisitions, and billion-dollar decisions without hesitation. Yet one text from a tired mother somehow unsettled him more than any boardroom ever had. His phone buzzed again before he could answer. Suddenly a new message appeared, shorter this time. Hi. Ethan frowned slightly. Another bubble appeared immediately after. Mom fell asleep holding the phone, so I stole it. Ethan blinked in surprise. Are you Liam? Yeah. You type slow for a grown-up. Ethan laughed quietly under his breath, earning a confused look from his assistant standing several feet away. He turned farther away from the crowd and typed back. That is because I am old and exhausted. Liam answered instantly. Mom says exhausted means your brain is tired and your heart is tired at the same time. Ethan stared at the sentence. Somewhere deep inside his chest, something shifted painfully. He remembered being 6 years old himself, sitting alone in oversized rooms while his father built a financial empire from airports and conference tables. Every birthday missed. Every baseball game ignored. Every promise delayed by another meeting. His father had once told him money first, family later. But later never came. Another text from Liam appeared. Are you really at the airport? Ethan smiled faintly. Yes. Big airport. Lots of people in expensive suits pretending they are important. Liam responded with a laughing emoji Claire probably did not even know he was using. Then another message came. Mom says rich people fly on private jets because regular airports smell weird. Ethan glanced around the luxury terminal and shook his head with amusement. Your mom is smarter than most people I know. There was a pause before Liam typed again. Are you rich? Ethan stared at the screen for several seconds. He could have lied. Instead he typed one word. Yes. Another pause followed. Then Liam sent back a message that made Ethan stop breathing for a moment. If you are rich, why do you sound sad? Ethan slowly lowered himself into one of the leather airport chairs, staring at the glowing words on the screen. Around him, people continued boarding flights, checking watches, talking loudly into phones, chasing schedules and deadlines that suddenly felt meaningless. He had been interviewed on magazine covers, praised by business networks, envied by millions online, but no one had ever asked him that question before. Not honestly. Not like this. His assistant walked over again, clearly frustrated now. "Mr. Walker, we are out of time." Ethan barely looked up. "Go ahead without me for a minute. The board is expecting you in Tokyo tomorrow morning." Ethan nodded absent-mindedly while still staring at Liam's message. Then he typed back slowly. "Sometimes people become successful before they learn how to become happy." Several seconds passed. Then Liam replied with complete sincerity. "That sounds like a really bad deal." Claire woke suddenly to the sound every parent fears in the middle of the night. Liam was coughing hard beside her, struggling to catch a full breath between each shallow inhale. The phone nearly slipped from her hand as panic flooded through her chest. Hey, sweetheart, slow down," she whispered quickly, sitting up beside him on the couch. Liam pressed one small hand against his chest while rain continued hitting the apartment windows outside. Claire reached for his inhaler on the coffee table, her hands trembling from exhaustion and fear at the same time. Ethan's phone buzzed immediately inside the airport terminal. He looked down and saw several messages arriving one after another. "He cannot breathe right again. I gave him the inhaler. It is not helping enough. Oh God." Ethan stood instantly. "Sir?" his assistant asked in confusion as Ethan grabbed his coat and started pacing away from the gate. Ethan typed quickly. "Call emergency services now." Claire looked down at the message while trying to steady Liam's breathing. "I cannot afford another ambulance bill." Ethan stopped walking. The words hit him like ice water. Across the terminal, wealthy travelers laughed beside luxury luggage stores while a woman somewhere in New York hesitated to call an ambulance because she was afraid of debt. Ethan typed back immediately. "Claire, listen to me carefully. Nothing matters more than your son breathing. Call now." Liam coughed again, harder this time, and Claire finally grabbed the phone beside her ear with shaking fingers. While she spoke to emergency dispatch, Ethan remained standing alone near the giant airport windows, listening to every frightened breath he could hear faintly through the speaker. He did not even realize he was holding his own breath too. "Sir, boarding closes in 3 minutes," the flight attendant reminded him gently from several feet away. Ethan ignored her completely. Claire ended the emergency call and tried to keep her voice calm for Liam. "They are coming, baby. Just keep looking at mommy." "Okay." Ethan typed again immediately. "Stay with him. Keep him sitting upright. You are doing fine." Claire swallowed tears she could not afford to lose control over right now. "How do you know what to say?" Ethan looked down at the screen for a moment before answering honestly. "Because no one said it to me when I was scared." The airport suddenly felt unbearably loud around him. Stock alerts buzzed on his phone. Missed calls from Tokyo flashed across the screen. His assistant approached again, now visibly stressed. "Mr. Walker, this merger cannot happen without you." Ethan looked toward the boarding gate where the final passengers disappeared into the jet bridge. Then he looked back at Claire's messages appearing one after another. "Liam keeps asking if he is going to be okay." Ethan typed instantly. "Tell him yes." Another message came seconds later. "He wants to hear it from you." Ethan froze for a moment. Then Claire's phone began ringing inside the apartment. She answered quickly and placed it on speaker beside Liam. Ethan's voice came through softer than either of them expected. "Hey, buddy." Liam struggled for air slightly before whispering, "Are you the airport guy?" Ethan smiled despite the tension crushing his chest. "Yeah, I am the airport guy." Liam coughed lightly again. "I do not want Mom to cry anymore." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Nobody around him noticed the billionaire standing motionless beside the runway windows, emotionally wrecked by the voice of a 6-year-old boy he had never met. "Listen to me, Liam," Ethan said carefully. "You are going to be okay tonight. The doctors are coming, and your mom is the strongest person in the room right now." For the first time all evening, Liam's breathing began slowing slightly. Then over the airport speakers, the final announcement echoed through the terminal. "Gate closed." Ethan looked toward the runway as the Tokyo flight slowly pulled away without him. By the time the ambulance lights disappeared from Claire's apartment building, the rain had finally started slowing over New York City. Liam sat wrapped in a small hospital blanket inside the emergency room, exhausted but breathing easier now while cartoon dinosaurs played quietly on the television mounted near the ceiling. Claire remained beside him holding a paper cup of burnt coffee she had not touched in 20 minutes. Her body ached with exhaustion, but relief kept her awake. Every few minutes her eyes drifted back to her phone screen. Ethan had not stopped checking in once. Did the doctors say he is okay? Claire smiled faintly despite herself and typed back. They said we came in at the right time. Ethan exhaled quietly from the back seat of the black SUV waiting outside the airport terminal. He had never canceled an international merger flight in his career. His entire executive team was still flooding his phone with messages demanding explanations, but he ignored all of them. Somehow the only thing that mattered tonight was whether a little boy he had never met could breathe normally again. His driver glanced at him through the mirror. Home, Mr. Walker? Ethan looked down at another incoming text from Claire before answering. Not yet. Claire stood up carefully to stretch her legs while Liam slept against her side. Across the waiting room, a mounted television suddenly switched to a late-night financial news segment. She barely paid attention at first until a familiar face appeared on the screen. Breaking tonight, Billionaire tech CEO Ethan Walker unexpectedly misses his Tokyo merger flight, sending Walker Technologies stock into uncertainty ahead of tomorrow morning's negotiations. Claire froze completely. On the television screen, Ethan stood outside a Manhattan office building wearing the same charcoal coat she had imagined earlier from his airport description. Calm, sharp, wealthy beyond comprehension. The reporter continued talking while images flashed of private jets, skyscrapers, and magazine covers with his face across them. Walker is considered one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America, with an estimated net worth exceeding $11 billion. Claire slowly looked back down at her phone. Ethan, airport guy, the stranger who stayed awake talking to her son. Her chest tightened with sudden embarrassment. Of course he had sounded different. Men like him lived in a completely different universe than women like her. She remembered the cracked kitchen tiles in her apartment, the overdue bills, the second-hand winter coat she wore every year because she could not afford another one. Meanwhile, Ethan Walker probably spent more money on dinner than she earned in a month. Her phone buzzed again. Is Liam asleep? Claire stared at the message for several seconds before replying. You never told me who you really were. Ethan leaned back slowly in the SUV seat as the city lights passed outside the windows. He knew this moment would change everything. I did not think it mattered tonight. Claire looked back toward the television where analysts debated stock prices beside Ethan's smiling magazine photos. It mattered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. For years people had looked at his money first and him second. Tonight had been the first time someone talked to him without expecting power, access, or influence. He did not want to lose that. Another message from Claire appeared. I feel stupid now. Ethan sat forward immediately. Why? Because I told a billionaire my electric bill problems while you were probably standing beside a private jet. Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment before answering honestly. Claire, tonight you were worried about your son surviving. I was worried about a business deal. Trust me, only one of those things actually mattered. Claire read the message twice while emotion tightened unexpectedly in her throat. Before she could answer, Liam stirred awake beside her and rubbed his sleepy eyes. Mom, he whispered softly. Yeah, baby. Liam looked around the hospital room before asking the question that made Claire's heart ache instantly. Did airport guy stay? Claire looked down at Liam's tired face and forced a small smile. Yeah, sweetheart, she whispered softly. He stayed. Liam nodded sleepily against the hospital pillow as if that answer alone made him feel safer. Claire brushed his blonde hair gently away from his forehead while her phone remained warm in her hand. Across the city, Ethan still sat inside the parked SUV outside the airport terminal long after most passengers had gone home. His driver had stopped asking questions nearly an hour ago. Manhattan glowed outside the tinted windows while financial news alerts continued flooding Ethan's screen non-stop. Board members, investors, angry executives. None of them compared to the message he received next. Liam asked if you stayed. Ethan stared at the screen for several seconds before typing back. Tell him I am not very good at leaving anymore. Claire read the message slowly, feeling something unfamiliar settle quietly inside her chest. It scared her a little. Men with Ethan's kind of power did not step into ordinary lives unless they wanted something. Yet nothing about tonight felt manipulative. If anything, Ethan sounded lonelier than she did. Her phone rang unexpectedly before she could overthink it further. She hesitated before answering. Hello. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan's voice came through low and calm. How is he really? Claire glanced toward Liam sleeping peacefully now beneath the thin hospital blanket. Better, she admitted softly. He finally stopped wheezing. Ethan leaned back against the SUV seat and closed his eyes briefly in relief. Claire could hear faint city traffic behind him. You sound tired, he said quietly. Claire laughed weakly. I worked a double shift yesterday, cleaned office buildings this morning, and spent tonight in the emergency room. So yes, slightly tired. Ethan smiled despite himself. When was the last time someone took care of you? Claire looked down at the hospital floor tiles. She could not remember. Somewhere along the way motherhood had turned her into the person everyone depended on while she silently stopped expecting support from anyone else. That long ago, huh? Ethan asked gently after she stayed quiet too long. Claire swallowed emotion building unexpectedly in her throat. You asked dangerous questions for someone I accidentally texted. Ethan looked out at the empty runway lights in the distance. Maybe because nobody asks honest questions anymore. Silence settled between them for a moment, but it did not feel awkward. Felt strangely safe. Claire finally spoke again. You really missed $1 billion flight because of us? Ethan let out a quiet breath. I missed a flight because a little boy was scared. Claire shook her head slowly in disbelief. Men like Ethan Walker were supposed to care about stock markets and headlines, not strangers in hospital waiting rooms. Yet tonight he had stayed through every cough, every panic-filled message, every moment she thought she might break apart. Your company must hate me, Claire said softly. Ethan actually laughed this time. My company hates everyone equally. Claire smiled before she could stop herself. On the other end of the call, Ethan heard the smile in her silence and realized something terrifying. He did not want this conversation to end. Not because she was beautiful, though he imagined she probably was. Not because he needed validation. But because for the first time in years, someone talked to him like he was simply a man instead of a billionaire. Claire adjusted Liam's blanket carefully. You should probably go home, she whispered. Ethan looked out at the dark city skyline glowing beyond the airport. Massive buildings carried his company logo across Manhattan, symbols of the empire he had spent his entire adult life building. Yet somehow home suddenly felt like a hospital room he had never even seen. Before he could answer, his driver quietly turned around from the front seat. Mr. Walker, he said carefully, I think we are being followed by reporters. Ethan looked through the rear window and saw camera flashes reflecting faintly in the rain behind them. Camera flashes reflected across the rain-covered streets behind Ethan's SUV like bursts of lightning. Reporters had started gathering near the airport exit after news spread that Ethan Walker unexpectedly abandoned the Tokyo merger flight. His driver tightened his grip on the steering wheel. They have been following us since the terminal, sir. Ethan rubbed his forehead slowly while still holding the phone near his ear. On the other side of the call, Claire remained quiet for a moment. You should probably deal with that, she said softly. Ethan glanced toward the growing line of photographers outside and let out a tired breath. I spent 10 years thinking public attention was proof I mattered, he admitted quietly. Tonight it just feels loud. Claire looked down at Liam sleeping peacefully beside her and understood exactly what he meant. Hospitals had a strange way of shrinking the importance of everything else in life. Money, titles, headlines. None of it mattered when someone you loved could not breathe. Ethan, she said carefully, still unfamiliar with saying his name out loud. You do not owe us anything. Ethan looked out the rain-streaked window again. That was the problem. Somehow he already felt like he did. Before he could answer, another incoming call flashed across his screen. Chairman Robert Hastings. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. I have to take this, he said quietly. Claire nodded even though he could not see her. Okay. Ethan hesitated. Claire. Yeah. Text me if Liam wakes up scared again. Her chest tightened unexpectedly at the gentleness in his voice. I will. The line disconnected. Immediately Ethan answered the board chairman's call. Robert did not bother greeting him first. Do you have any idea what tonight cost this company? Ethan leaned back against the leather seat silently while reporters continued chasing the SUV outside. The Tokyo investors are furious. Our stock drops 6% by opening bell if this merger collapses. Ethan looked down at Claire's last message still visible on his phone screen beside photos from financial news alerts. Somehow the contrast made him feel sick. Then reschedule the meeting, Ethan said calmly. Robert's voice sharpened instantly. You do not reschedule a $12 billion international acquisition because you changed your mind at the airport. Ethan stared out at the city lights passing beyond the rain. No, he replied quietly. You reschedule it because there are more important things than money. Silence exploded across the line. What happened to you tonight? Robert finally asked. Ethan did not answer because he genuinely did not know. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, Claire stepped quietly into the hospital hallway to avoid waking Liam. Nurses moved through the late-night corridors while televisions played muted morning news coverage near the waiting room. Ethan's face appeared everywhere now. Billionaire CEO abandons critical merger. Markets uncertain after Walker disappears from Tokyo negotiations. Claire wrapped her arms around herself uneasily. This world was dangerous for ordinary people. Men like Ethan existed under constant cameras, constant scrutiny, constant judgment. Someone like her becoming connected to someone like him would eventually turn ugly. It always did. Her phone buzzed softly in her hand. She expected another message from Ethan. Instead, she froze when she saw an unknown number followed by a text. You need to stop contacting Mr. Walker immediately. Claire stared at the screen in confusion before another message arrived. People like you always appear when wealthy men become vulnerable. Her stomach tightened instantly. A third message followed seconds later. If you care about your son, stay away from Ethan Walker. Claire's pulse started racing as she looked around the empty hospital hallway. She did not know who sent the messages. But suddenly the warmth and safety she had felt all night disappeared completely. At that exact moment, Ethan's phone buzzed again inside the SUV. This time it was a text from Claire. I think someone knows about us. The moment Ethan read Claire's message, every conversation inside the SUV disappeared into silence around him. I think someone knows about us. Ethan immediately typed back. What happened? Claire stood alone beneath the dim hospital hallway lights, staring at the anonymous messages still glowing on her screen. Nurses walked past pushing carts while distant monitors beeped softly from nearby rooms, but suddenly she felt exposed in a way she had not before. Like invisible eyes had entered a moment that was never supposed to belong to the public. She sent Ethan screenshots of the texts without replying to the sender. Several seconds passed before Ethan answered. Do not respond to them. Claire leaned against the wall and crossed her arms tightly. This is exactly why people like me stay away from men like you. Ethan read the message twice. The words hurt more than he expected. Not because they were unfair, but because they were true. His world consumed everything around it. Privacy, peace, ordinary lives. He looked out the SUV window where camera flashes still followed the vehicle from across the street. Get us moving, Ethan told the driver quietly. The SUV finally pulled away from the airport curb while reporters rushed after them through the rain. Ethan called Claire immediately. She answered after the second ring. You should not have contacted me, she whispered before he could speak. Ethan frowned. Claire. No, listen to me. You are famous, rich, powerful. I clean office buildings at 5 in the morning and count grocery coupons before payday. Our worlds do not even belong on the same planet. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Tonight your son needed help. That is all I cared about. Claire's voice softened for a second before fear crept back in again. And tomorrow your board members, reporters, and investors will decide I am some woman trying to trap a billionaire. Ethan did not answer immediately because he knew she was not wrong. His entire career had trained people to view relationships as transactions. Every woman photographed beside him became tabloid speculation by morning. Every public appearance turned into a headline. But Claire had entered his life by accident, carrying exhaustion instead of ambition. And somehow that difference mattered more than anything. "Claire," Ethan finally said quietly, "I have spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Tonight was the first conversation in a very long time that felt real." Claire looked through the hospital room window at Liam sleeping peacefully inside. Her heart pulled painfully in two directions at once. Part of her wanted to protect her son from Ethan's chaotic world. The other part already trusted Ethan more than she trusted most people she had known for years. Before she could answer, another incoming call interrupted Ethan. This time it was his chief legal officer. Ethan almost ignored it before finally answering with visible frustration. "What?" "We have a serious problem," the lawyer said immediately. "The board is holding an emergency vote at 8 o'clock this morning. If you do not get on the next Tokyo flight, they may remove you as CEO." Ethan stared silently ahead while Manhattan lights blurred outside the rain-covered windows. Claire heard enough through the phone to understand. Her stomach tightened instantly. "Ethan," she whispered softly, "you need to go." Ethan rubbed his jaw slowly. "I missed one meeting." "It is not just a meeting." Her voice trembled now. "It is your company. Your entire life." Ethan looked down at the hospital bracelet photo Claire had accidentally sent earlier while showing Liam sleeping. Tiny wrist. Dinosaur. Pajamas. Small details that somehow mattered more to him than boardrooms suddenly did. "Maybe my entire life should not only be a company," he said quietly. Silence settled between them again before a small sleepy voice suddenly appeared in the background. "Mom!" Claire turned quickly toward the hospital bed. Liam sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Who are you talking to?" Claire hesitated before answering softly. "Airport guy." Liam smiled instantly despite his exhaustion. Then he asked the question that completely shattered whatever distance Ethan still tried maintaining. "Did he leave us too?" For a moment Ethan could not speak. The question from a 6-year-old boy somehow carried more weight than every boardroom demand waiting for him before sunrise. "Did he leave us too?" Ethan looked out the rain-covered SUV window, while Manhattan blurred past in silver reflections. His entire life had been built around leaving. Leaving birthdays for meetings. Leaving relationships for work. Leaving people before they could disappoint him first. Somewhere along the way, success had become the excuse for every empty room he returned home to at night. Claire sat quietly beside Liam's hospital bed, her heart tightening as silence stretched across the phone line. Then Ethan finally answered in a low, steady voice. "Nobody. I am still here." Liam smiled sleepily and pulled the blanket closer around himself. "Good," he whispered. "Everybody leaves eventually." Ethan closed his eyes hard at the words. Nobody should sound that used to disappointment at 6 years old. Claire looked down at her son, emotion building painfully in her chest. She wanted to protect him from getting attached to someone who belonged to a completely different world. But she also could not ignore the simple truth unfolding in front of her. Ethan had stayed through the hardest night of their lives when he had absolutely no reason to. The SUV suddenly slowed outside a private airport entrance on the west side of Manhattan. Ethan frowned slightly. "Why are we stopping?" The driver glanced back carefully. "Your assistant arranged another jet to Tokyo, sir. It leaves in 20 minutes. Ethan stared through the windshield at the waiting aircraft beyond the gates. Bright runway lights cut through the rain while airport workers prepared the stairs beside the jet. One flight. One signature. One meeting. That was all it would take to save the company he spent a decade building. His phone buzzed again with another flood of board messages. Final decision needed immediately. Claire heard the silence in his breathing through the phone. "Ethan," she whispered softly, "go save your company." Ethan looked down at the phone in his hand. Then he heard Liam's small voice again in the background. "Airport guy." Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah, buddy. When I get scared at night, Mom says people who love you stay." Ethan felt something inside him finally break open completely. Not painfully. Honestly. For years he had believed love was secondary to achievement, something you earned after success arrived. But tonight a tired single mother and a little boy with dinosaur pajamas had accidentally shown him everything he built meant nothing if there was nobody waiting for him at the end of it. Outside the SUV, The private jet engine started humming louder in the rain. Ethan's assistant called frantically through another incoming line. "Mr. Walker, if you do not board now, the board will remove you by morning." Ethan stared at the aircraft for several long seconds. Then he looked back down at Claire's contact on his phone. Claire. Wrong number. Best conversation of his life. Slowly, Ethan leaned forward toward the driver. "Turn around." The driver blinked in confusion. "Sir." Ethan looked back at the jet one final time before answering calmly. "My son comes first now." Silence filled the SUV. Even Ethan seemed surprised by the words after saying them aloud. But for the first time in years, the decision felt easy. Claire covered her mouth with trembling fingers as tears filled her eyes instantly. Across the room, Liam smiled sleepily without fully understanding why her expression changed. Ethan leaned back against the seat while the SUV pulled away from the airport and back toward the city instead of the runway. For the first time in his adult life, he was not chasing money, headlines, or another deal. He was chasing home. And somehow, against all logic, home suddenly looked like a tired woman sitting beside a hospital bed under fluorescent lights in the middle of New York City.